going to be our initial training, but specifically for social studies. So we do have some new social studies writing lessons in our platform that have been in the works for a while, and we've gotten lots of feedback from your district curriculum leaders. And so I'm excited to show you those today. In terms of our agenda, some big overview of what is Circa and what is a writing lesson specifically. I'm going to walk you through kind of answers to those big questions, but then specifics around navigating the platform and providing feedback in the platform, and then hopefully enough time for resources and Q&A. I know we are only slated for an hour. I know that's going to be quick, so it will be a little talking heavy on my part, but please do know that you are welcome to unmute and ask a question or throw it in the chat. I can answer, or I know there's a couple folks on the line that can help chime in as well. So please feel free to do that at any point. So because this is designed for elementary, I know some folks have been trained in other disciplines because you teach multiple subjects. So I just wanted to do a quick poll in the chat. So a 1 to 5 answer. 1 would be, I've never used ThinkCERCA before, maybe even don't know what it is. 5 being, I'm very familiar with ThinkCERCA. So if you don't mind just dropping 1 to 5, 1 being no idea what ThinkCERCA is or I've never used it before, and 5 being I'm very familiar. I just kind of want to gauge where everybody is at. I'm seeing lots of 3s, a couple 1s. Great, welcome. 2s, 1, 3s. Okay. Okay, great. So it looks like we have a mix. Ooh, we got a 4. I love it. No one said 5. Maybe we'll get to a 5 by the end of the session today. But great to have everybody here. I know we're kind of coming from different perspectives, so hopefully this can be a good overview, but also dive into this social studies lesson specifically and leave you feeling comfortable with those moving forward. So for those of you that are 3 or 4, this will be review, but maybe I can give you something that you haven't learned yet. Okay, so just to start, the first question of this training, what is Circa? So ThinkCERCA is going to be the platform that you encounter, and that's what I'll kind of train you on, where we find the lessons. But Circa, it's its own framework, and so ThinkCERCA, the whole intention here is to teach critical thinking, and how we do that is through close reading, academic writing, and collaboration. We consistently see excellent reading growth through this process, through this platform, and hopefully those that are familiar with what kind of lessons are on ThinkCERCA, you'll notice that it's not revolutionary. A lot of the pieces in our platform are going to just be best practices. I like to say it's all put into a nice package and tied with a pretty bow, and so it's the goal for us is critical thinking, and how we really do that is through leveraging the Circa framework. So Circa, like all things in education, it seems, is an acronym. So Circa stands for claim, evidence, reasoning, counter arguments, and audience. And you might be thinking, or you might have already been doing parts of this acronym in your classroom. I know I used to teach secondary social studies, and I was definitely doing CERs in my classroom all the time. And so Circa might just take it a little bit of a step further, but beyond that, we really see this as a framework that's it's a tool that we want to teach students so that they can kind of have that in their toolbox moving forward, so that they can be effective readers, writers, speakers moving forward. For me, this year has really called to attention the of critical thinking. I think about the questions that our students, the questions that we as humans have faced this year, but definitely our students have faced over the past year, whether it's about COVID, whether it's about the racial reckoning of last summer. There are big questions on the table for us here in America, but definitely on our planet. So I know that students are being asked to take in lots of complex information from lots of different sources, and we want to make sure that they can take in all that information and express their point of view effectively, and Circa is a tool that can help them do that. And so this is kind of my cheesy pitch, but I hope it doesn't come across as cheesy, because it's very genuine, and that we want students, in order to fulfill their potential. We want them to be strong readers, strong writers, able to articulate themselves effectively, but further than that, be engaged in their communities, in society as a whole, so that they can make and be a part of positive changes to come. So again, I joke that that's kind of my cheesy pitch. Oop, and I'm just seeing that I have some coworkers in the waiting room. I think I've let everyone in so far. So maybe if they want to hop out and hop back in, maybe I'll get a new bell to let them in. Okay, so that's Circa as a whole. Now, obviously, maybe you're thinking, Kristen, that sounds super nice. Obviously, we want that for our students, but how does that look in my classroom? How does that look on a day-to-day basis? And so it comes down to the writing lesson. And so our next big question to answer, or that I have as a part of our agenda, is what is a writing lesson? Perfect. I am checking the waiting room for those that are concerned. I'm not, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe if I pause real quick and make sure I am, unfortunately, I have let everyone in. There is no waiting room at this point. So, but please keep chatting if folks are still having issues. I want to make sure they can get in. Okay, so the next question for the training is, what is a writing lesson? That's going to be the main component on ThinkCERCA on the platform in order to get students practicing these critical thinking skills and practicing writing. And so I've added in a few slides that really tie in what the goals are in JCPS, and specifically around social studies, and how the goals in JCPS and the goals in Kentucky are going to align really nicely with what is outlined in a writing lesson. Okay, and I know that there are some social studies folks on the line. I think Ryan's here, Rebecca, I saw Vincent, and so this is my open invitation for any of you to interrupt me at any point. But as we're working on literacy development, and Ryan, I might just pass over to you at any point here, because I want to make sure that we're talking about this correctly, but we're moving towards disciplinary literacy. And the goal here is that ThinkCERCA can help us do that. And so, Ryan, not to put you on the spot. Ryan,
yeah, no, that's fine. So yeah, so basically, as you guys may have seen inside the social studies standards, one of the biggest shifts is that we are no longer just a rote memorization, here's a bunch of facts idea, that we have always had a disciplinary literacy aspect to it. And now we have inquiry standards that help us get there. So when we talk about disciplinary literacy, we're talking about how do we look at sources? How do we think about multiple sources? How they corroborate evidence? Who the author of a source might be, right? And oftentimes we think about that differently than specifically if you come from, say, more of a science background, right, or even ELA. Disciplinary literacy, each discipline has its own literacy aspect. And one of the things that ThinkCERCA, and one of the reasons why this training has been delayed for such a long time, is that ThinkCERCA made sure that the materials they were putting together aligned to our standards and aligned to our discipline. And so those are some of the biggest shifts that are coming when it comes to this disciplinary aspect inside the social studies.
Wonderful. And while I get frozen in the screen and it won't let me click forward. Perfect. So the next couple of slides, and Ryan, while we have you, are going to be around linking kind of what's happening in the writing lesson with what students are going to be asked to do on assessments. Could you talk a little bit about that? And feel free to let me know which one I need to head forward on a slide.
Absolutely. So as you guys know, we've had and I'm sure that either Vince or Rebecca can put this into the chat as well, that we've had some of the practice tests released for social studies for the 5th grade assessment. One of the culminating aspects of the 5th grade assessment is what you're looking at here, that students will be expected to be able to use 5 different sources. All of these are primary sources, right? In which to synthesize that information into a claim, right? And so that's exactly why we're here, right? As far as ThinkCERCA, is that ThinkCERCA allows us, specifically now, right, to be able to look at multiple sources and then be able to synthesize that together to make a claim. Where the ELA version, right, of ThinkCERCA was really looking at only one source at a time, right? But just so you guys know, one of the more strenuous aspects of the 5th grade assessment for social studies is multiple sources in order to corroborate evidence, right? There's our disciplinary language, in order to construct a claim. And you guys can read that, right? Construct an argument that answers the supporting question: does the Constitution establish a government that promotes the general welfare? Support your claim with evidence from multiple sources. Write at least 2 paragraphs, right? So you guys can sort of see that this is a much more robust understanding, right? And this may look very similar to ELA, right? But it's the way that the sources function that changes the nature of it and makes it much more disciplinary specific. This is the middle school. Just so you guys know, I think it's very important for elementary folks to see that you guys are prepping our students to be able to go on above and beyond, right? So this is the middle school assessment. You guys can look at this right on your own time, I think. And the next one here, Kristen, is the high school assessment. And you can see that it just gets, it's really kind of the same boat, right? Everybody's being asked to write claims. Everyone is being asked to use evidence in order to support those claims as they try to answer questions. And that's one of the reasons why we've been very hesitant about endorsing a lot of different products and vendors, is because there's very few that actually do exactly what the assessment's moving towards, exactly as it is aligned to standards. And so a few of those, right, ThinkCERCA is one, DPQ is another, right, and our framework is a third. So those are just a few examples of it.
I didn't even mean to move forward. My apologies, Ryan. Perfect. I think that's a really good context, and I appreciate you explaining that. And I think so in the partnership, and why it's we're doing this training now here in March is because there was great intentionality in rolling this out, and great intentionality in our new social studies lessons to make sure that we were working on the skills that folks need to be focused on, but also that what we're hearing, so we can incorporate what we're hearing from teachers, what we're hearing from district leaders, to make sure that these lessons really fit the needs here. And so I just put this slide in here to make sure to kind of focus on what's coming. So what are these new lessons and what do they offer that might be different from folks that have seen stuff in ELA? How might these be different? And so as social studies teachers, folks want to, you can watch me attempt to multitask. I know everybody's so much more familiar with this with these Zoom classrooms. Okay, so as a social studies teacher, I want to create a classroom where students are engaged critically with social studies, not only where they learn facts, dates, and names.
Hi.
As a student, I want to investigate sources that reflect diverse perspectives and experiences and allow me to form my own critical understanding of issues. And again, as a teacher, I need ThinkCERCA's lessons to align to state curriculum standards. And so those are 3 things that have been incorporated into our lessons. And so the new social studies writing lessons are going to have students examine multiple diverse perspectives to understand past and its influence on present day. So something that's right away going to look different from some of the lessons you would have seen in an ELA training or a science or a math training is that there are multiple sources or multiple texts. And so some of the writing prompts of these new lessons I've listed down here below. Now this is going to be over different grade levels. Just keep that in mind. And for today's lesson, we're going to focus on one specific lesson about active citizenship. And I just want to call out that, again, as we're kind of focused on what do students and teachers want when they think about these new social studies lessons, the main thing is that each is going to incorporate 2 primary sources, might be a document, could be a song, a poem, an artifact. They're going to, 80% of these writing lessons are going to include sources from a diverse perspective. And then there's always going to be topic overviews of these primary sources, and they're always going to kind of provide that robust historical context, which is crucial. And so before I dive in to kind of some of the norms around doing a writing lesson, I want to make sure that everybody is able to log into the platform, and I'm going to get us all lined up on the same lesson. So folks that haven't signed in before, you are going to need an upgrade code. I'm going to copy and paste it into the chat. Upgrade codes for folks that haven't signed in before. Okay, so that's in the chat, but no, if you've already signed into ThinkCERCA, then we're just headed to ThinkCERCA.com and click log in. But I want to make sure that everybody heads to ThinkCERCA right now, and I'm going to take us to the same lesson together, one of our new writing lessons. So ThinkCERCA.com and click log in. Okay. So to see the new social studies lessons are kind of going to be integrated into the social studies curriculum. So to find the lesson today, I'm just going to have everybody type it in. That's going to be the easiest way to find it. And so we're looking for a lesson on active citizenship. And you might have to click enter depending on the grade band that's showing up for you. So you might have to click enter after typing in active citizenship into the search bar. But eventually I want everybody to be at a page that looks something like this. If you're on my screen or you're working on your own, maybe pop back over and take a look. So one of our new lessons is called Active Citizenship. This is going to be for third grade reading level. And we're just gonna preview it for today's training. So if everybody clicks on preview, a screen should open that looks like this. It's going to be in our classic ThinkCERCA writing lesson design. And we're going to spend our time walking through this together. So if everybody can get to active citizenship, and then hopefully your screen matches mine. If anybody's having any issues, feel free to drop something in the chat. I know some people might have to create their account for the first time. So I want to just pause for 1 second as everybody gets caught up. Okay. So I'm going to toggle between my slides here a little bit, but as we review the active citizenship module, and this is going to be our new writing lessons, I want to just call attention to some writing lesson norms, really what we see as kind of essential in order to see the most growth for students as they complete the writing lesson. And so there's 3 buckets for this. One is skills instruction. So obviously the writing lesson is quite rigorous, and there are many skills that students need as they're going through the lesson. And so it's important to kind of focus on introducing those skills intentionally, reteaching and or practicing them as we go through. The second bucket is going to be around engagement and collaboration. Ooh, thank you so much, Rebecca. Just kind of calling to attention in what ways students can work with their peers. We have lots of ideas. I'm going to be throwing out some around engagement and collaboration. I know that this year is a little tricky in that we're, remote currently, but we're switching back to in person. So there's like lots of different moving pieces, but we have a ton of ideas for engagement. And so I'll give some as we walk through today. And then finally, how will I give students feedback on their work? We know, and the research says that if students don't receive feedback on their writing, we do not see the same level of growth. And so I'm going to talk through the rubric option in ThinkCERCA, and we're going to walk through that at the end. Okay. So to bring us back to the writing lesson, this might be a little bit of review for folks that are kind of at that 3 and they feel pretty comfortable with ThinkCERCA, but maybe I can point out a thing or two that you aren't familiar with. But the ThinkCERCA writing lesson is going to be a 6-step process. And what's really powerful about the CERCA framework and really ThinkCERCA being used in multiple subjects is that these 6 steps are the same regardless of the discipline that a student is encountering ThinkCERCA. So they're going to be very familiar with these same 6 steps if you're implementing in multiple classes or if you only teach one subject, depending on who's here. So the first step of any ThinkCERCA writing lesson is always a personal connection question. So our topic is around active citizenship. Here in green is going to be our writing prompt. What does it mean to be an active member of your community? But to get us started, students are going to encounter a personal connection prompt. And so it's going to ask students to write about a time they helped a family member, friend, neighbor in your community. How did the experience make you feel? How did that person you helped respond to your actions? Okay, students can start to write. Anything that they write gets saved for them. Something to call out right away, though, is that teachers do this differently. So sometimes some teachers won't even have students in the platform for this step. Maybe we'll read the topic overview as a class, and maybe we'll review the vocabulary, but I'll just have them turn and talk about this personal connection question, okay? It's more about the process, less about physically typing everything into the platform. I think that's important to call out, especially with our younger learners who are still learning how to type, that can be time consuming, and sometimes it might be more effective to have them talk out some of these points. Okay. When students are ready, or as a class, as you move on, they can click the number 2, or they can click next. Either will take them to the second step. And so this is where, for folks that are familiar with our writing lessons from ELA or other disciplines, this is where you'll notice some updates is in the read step, because there will be multiple sources listed. So first, we're going to start with an article from Crabtree Publishing. What is citizenship? What rights and responsibilities do citizens have? If I scroll down, a couple things that I might notice. First is that the vocabulary words are going to be bolded. And so if students click on those, they can see a definition. You might also notice that there are pause and reflect questions built in. Okay, so these are intended to call in a real world example, call in a moment for students to think about the text as it relates to their own lives. You'll notice that there are lines that break up the different sources. As you can see, the second source is going to be an article from Teaching Tolerance. But again, vocab words are going to be bolded. As I scroll down, I can see another pause and reflect question. Okay. And then we get to the third source. In this case, this is going to be a letter from Little Miss Flint to then President Barack Obama. And you can see the letter, or the text of her letter here. And then you can see President Obama's response below. Okay, so those are going to be the 3 sources that students are asked to read and analyze. At the top, it can be read to them, okay? And so it's not broken up into the individual sources. There will be like a natural pause. This is a teacher actually reading it, so, and not a robot. So you'll kind of have that natural gap between the sources, but you'd want to, maybe pause to kind of set that intentional break. All right, over to the right, I can see multiple choice comprehension questions here. There's going to be 5 that address all 3 of the sources. Just in terms of functionality, as students go through and answer the questions, I'm just selecting random answers. I hit submit answers. There will be a stopgap that will ask me if I'm ready to submit my answers. Teachers use this differently. The questions are intended to be a comprehension check. And so lots of teachers like to leverage this moment and to have them work with peers to make sure that they are finding the correct answers, or if they need to go back and switch their answers, they can before hitting OK. Once they hit OK, it will be automatically scored for them. And just something to note, they do see the answers. So I can see the correct answers once I hit OK. Again, just to kind of show you some of that functionality. All right. Again, I can either click step 3 or I can click next. Step 3 is called engage with the text. This is where students are asked to start to address this writing prompt by pulling out evidence that supports the prompt. So there will be directions for students for each of the highlighters. So we've got an aqua highlighter and a pink highlighter. Here you'll see where it says use aqua to highlight words and phrases that explain what citizenship is, add notes about Rosa and Mari how Rosa and Mari contribute to their communities. Okay, so I am going to have to know which of the sources are being referred to here. In this case, it's going to be a girl and a word, and I go through, I highlight, adding notes about how Rosa and Mari contributed to their communities. And again, everything's going to get saved for students. They can go through with the pink highlighter as well, following those directions. And I'm just kind of showing you functionality here. I'm going to review all what this could look like in a classroom afterwards. I like to just go through and kind of show functionality, but just keep in mind here, when we talk about that second essential piece of kind of a norm for a writing lesson is collaboration and engagement. And so students do not need to complete this process completely alone. Not at all. Actually, anytime that they can collaborate is a good thing. And so an easy place to collaborate is here on step 3. If we are working in pairs or working in small groups, I have maybe half the class do aqua, half the class do pink, and we share out, have a class discussion around finding some strong evidence. This is an easy step for that. Okay, step 4 is a summary of the text. There is going to be a sentence starter at the top that students can copy down if they'd like. And then I want to spend a good chunk of time talking about steps 5 and 6, because this is going to be where students actually begin to construct their argument, where they start to build their written response. And so it ends up usually being one of the more time-consuming steps, other than, I would say, step 2 being the reading itself. Okay, so in step 5, I see this step as a digital graphic organizer. This is where students are going to be asked to first state a claim. They really won't be able to add anything until they've stated a claim. And so in the green, it'll say what my writing prompt is. In this case, what does it mean to be an active member of your community? If I need help getting started, I should definitely click on this need help getting started button. I call that out for teachers because sometimes students overlook it, but you'll notice that immediately I've got some sentence starters. So I can copy the sentence starter for claim down into my claim box if I need it. They can be an active citizen by, and I would list an example there. You'll also notice that the add to your claim button pops up. And then now it'll say, add the following cards to support your claim. So here's where I can say to my students, as their teacher, you know, this for this Circa, we are going to be writing a claim. We're going to support it with one reason. We're going to provide a piece of evidence that backs up our claim and one piece of reasoning. Okay, you'll notice here that there's no directions that explicitly say, and now write a 2-paragraph response. That is because the expectations really are, they should be coming from you as the teacher. This isn't a tool where, you know, we've got AI or robots kind of facilitating the process. Instead, this is definitely teacher-led and teacher-facilitated. And so they'll need your kind of guidance here to understand what to add next. And so depending on your expectations, maybe they're writing one paragraph and you want each of these pieces included. You can obviously leverage what I'm showing you now, which is the preview format, to kind of show them what they would need to have up on their screens as well. I'm just going to type in here to show you what it looks like once students have begun typing. Because once I've added those pieces in for step 5, and maybe I want to look over at my highlights and type, you know, add some evidence. Maybe some of my notes can be the basis for my reasoning. You're going to have to use your imagination here, as I'm obviously not providing any actual content there. When I get to step 6, create your Circa, you'll notice it's kind of a blank page here. And I think this can sometimes be discouraging for students, especially the first few times they use Circa, if they aren't familiar with the Your Work little tab here, and copy all to draft. Okay, and so just keep in mind, you might have to point that out to them, and then they can spend their time making this a cohesive piece of formal academic writing. Maybe I'm putting this into a paragraph. Maybe I'm adding some quotes or citations, things like that. And then I can hit submit at the top. One more thing that I'd like to call attention to on this step is over here, obviously the vocab's listed. We talked about that a little bit, but there's also the rubric listed. it basically is shown as a checklist. And so this can be really helpful to call out for students before they hit submit, to go through and make sure that they can check the boxes for the parts of the argument that you're focusing on, or for the entire evaluation criteria, depending on kind of your expectations for their writing. So,
Kristen, do you mind if I add something real quick?
I'd love that.
Yeah, so part of the rubric, I know that in social studies, we're really trying to develop a rubric that can be used universally, not just with ThinkCERCA and across the way here. And we still encourage that rubric, and if Vincent or Rebecca will put that into the chat, just so you guys can see it. However, part of ThinkCERCA's goal is to be able to collect data across multiple contents for a school. And so we're recommending, in this case, to actually forgo that rubric on our end to adopt ThinkCERCA's rubric. Just so that we can keep good data collection across the different contents. Now, in elementary, it won't matter as much as it will in social studies, because you guys might actually have the same group of students that you're comparing, right, through different contents if you're using this. But just as an FYI, the rubric that we've got in the chat there will eventually be aligned to standards-based grading and also aligned to the KD assessment. But ThinkCERCA is a completely different set of this that's giving us a different set of data, and we want to be able to respect that data. So.
Thank you. Thanks for that context, Ryan. And I'll share a little bit more closer to the end of the presentation about how you find that rubric and how you can use it in ThinkCERCA. And I can also just give you a little glimpse into what that data starts to look like and how that can be used to inform our instruction moving forward, and why it can be helpful that we're all using one rubric together across disciplines. Okay, so this was just an overview intended to kind of get a feel for the functionality of a writing lesson. I mentioned, and if I head back to my slides here, I mentioned that it's extremely important that this is teacher-led or teacher-facilitated. I think it probably goes without saying, but our students probably can't become good writers without our teacher, without our involvement as educators, as teachers, and without that essential piece of providing feedback. And so I just want to walk you through what this could look like in your classroom. I'm hopping around on my slides a little bit, but if I go to slide 33, I have the question listed, how does this look in a classroom? And the goal here isn't to tell you how it should look, it's more how it could look. But I know, at least for me in my instruction, I always love taking other people's plans and making them better. And so I hope that by providing you a plan, you can take it and make it better. And so the steps of the writing lesson, those 6 steps that stay consistent regardless of what writing lesson you're in, are a great way to engagement strategies and a great way to just organize your planning. So if I were to do a ThinkCERCA writing lesson, I would be organizing my thinking around what am I going to do at each step and how long will each step take me. So that first step is a personal connection question. I called this out when we kind of walked through it, but not everything needs to be done in the platform for us to see the growth and for us to really help develop these strong writing skills. And so maybe students just do a turning talk around the question, depending on the question or how personal it is. You'll want to weigh that as you preview the text in the question. Then we get to step 2. Maybe I'll have students read the text. Maybe we'll read parts of or one of the sources together. They'll listen to another source. Maybe they'll read it in pairs and partners. And maybe for the five question comprehension check, I'll have them complete an error analysis. And this is linked for you. Like I said, we have a ton of engagement strategies. So we hope that anything we provide to you is already kind of prepped for you. And so this could be an error analysis for each question they get wrong. I just want them to go back and review and dive back in for better comprehension. And so an error analysis kind of process could help them do that. Then step 3, engage with the text. This is where they're pulling out evidence. Now, maybe I want a little bit more intentionality around ways that they could collaborate together to find evidence. And so we have an activity, it's called Collaborate to Find Evidence, really original. But I would split them into small groups and assign each group a color. I'm going to have them go through a series of prompts to just make sure that they're pulling out really high quality evidence, and then we can share with their peers. Okay. And so again, this isn't to say do it this way exactly, but just to call out the ways that students can actively dive into the material, actively be learning, and also collaborating with their peers. For step 4, I didn't even put a summary. I didn't even put a strategy in there apparently. But the step 4 is most often done as like a group summary. Maybe have students start by writing a three sentences, what they remember from the writing, pair up, and together they come up with a 2-sentence response, something like that. Share it out on a Jamboard, share it out on a Padlet. For steps 5 and 6, some of my favorite strategies. In step 5, my favorite go-to strategy, at least when we're in a classroom, fingers crossed that day is soon, but is to do a gallery walk. And so in this case, I would set up my classroom to have each step of a Circa, or each part of a Circa, as a part of the gallery walk. And I would have students working on Post-its in small groups to provide an example of what that could look like for the specific response we're responding to. And so all of this is prep for you if that sounds like something interesting, but just a way to have students see other student writing, reflect on their own, work with their peers, all to gear up for that final piece of writing in step 6, where they're going to actually submit their own response. And in this step, I have a writing checklist linked. I also say, really leveraging that in-app rubric checklist can be powerful, just for students to do a reflection on what they've written before they submit, and check each of the parts of Circa, or whatever the focus is for this writing lesson. Okay, so again, this isn't designed to say this is how you should do it. Instead, it's intended to just give you some ideas. This is how it could look. These are just some ones that I kind of steal and piece together. But really, as you start to get familiar with the writing lesson, thinking of it as 6 separate steps and how you can infuse engagement and collaboration at each step might be an easy way to kind of organize your thinking. Okay, we have about 20 minutes left. The one part we'll need to discuss is just some of the logistics around the platform, so navigating the platform itself, and then also providing feedback once you have student writing in your platform. And so I have slides on this. We're going to be walking through slides 19 through 32, but I'm actually just going to kind of take you on a tour. So just if you're following the PowerPoint, that's intended for somebody to be able to flip through it, but I'm just going to walk you through it in the platform. Let me check the chat real quick. Oh, perfect. Okay, so in ThinkCERCA itself, once you've logged in, you've got 2 main tabs that you're gonna spend most of your time in. One is the classes tab, and the other is the curriculum tab. Next year, when teacher reports are revamped to our new reporting, I think I'm going to be saying a lot more about the reports tab. But for now, you'll be in classes and curriculum. Now, I think hopefully it's intuitive, but curriculum is going to be where you go to find any lesson that you'd like to assign. You can see the writing modules organized by theme below. And if you're in the social studies, on the social studies page, the skills lessons and direct instruction are listed below that. Now, you might be logged in as, an ELA. You were asked to choose a content area. And so in that case, direct instruction and skills lessons are at the top. But your classes tab is going to be where you go when you want to maybe change a due date of an assignment, check on a student's account. This is going to be where you go when you want to grade. It's all of the logistics of managing assignments and writing in ThinkCERCA. I think of this kind of as the Google Classroom part of the platform. So you'll organize if you are self-contained and you have all the subjects in one class period, you'll probably only need one class, but your classes should be populated for you when you log into ThinkCERCA. I know that there's kind of an issue with elementary in that it's because of how it integrates with PowerSchool. It's gonna break apart all of your different subjects. So what I've seen other elementary teachers do is just using their homeroom class, for example, and assigning lessons just in that. It really is up to you, but just know that you probably have, 7 or 8 classes listed when you log into ThinkCERCA. But your students should be in there automatically, and so students should be in there automatically. They just log in using their school ID, their Google login. Okay, once you start using ThinkCERCA, though, your account will start to look like this. And I can click into this class for a couple different things. One is to share things to Google Classroom, for example. Now, it won't talk back and forth in the sense that if I grade something in here, it won't share my results to Google Classroom, or it won't share them to PowerSchool. That actually has to be manually done. But I can, if I wanted to link a specific lesson, I can always click into a lesson. I can always go to this settings button. I can share to Google Classroom. I can copy the links to, save those for students, things like that. Once I'm in an assignment, there's other things I can see as well. You'll notice that the status is listed. Any student that's in progress, I can actually click on in progress and see where they're at in the lesson, which is really helpful when we can't physically walk around classrooms. Once we can do that, that's probably more efficient. I can see the date that they submitted. I can see the scores on their multiple choice, and then writing once I've graded it, okay? This is where I see due dates as well, and I can always change the due date if I'd like. Okay, as I go back, let me see if there's anything else I wanted to point out. Again, quick overview here. Oh, it's the roster. So as students, it should automatically sync every night. But if there was ever an issue and you just needed to, make sure a student had access for the day, you could always just enroll them and we can combine their accounts later. You can also reset passwords and things in here as well. But hopefully that's not an issue, as it should be speaking with PowerSchool. If at any point you have an issue and it's the middle of the school day and you just don't have time or don't want to email me, this orange button is a live chat button. This is a real person. His name's Alfego. I would argue he's the most popular ThinkCERCA staff member because all he does is work with teachers, and he's quite lovely. So he will can respond to you, and that's live 9 to 6 your time each day. Okay, so I want to pause. I know that I've been talking a lot and I've provided a lot of information. The last piece is to talk about providing feedback. But before I do that, I want to pause, make sure there isn't any lingering questions, anything that's come up that I went through too quickly and you need to, ask a clarifying question. So I'll take a quick breather. Anything coming up, feel free to chat or unmute.
At the beginning, you talked about the activation codes. What were those for? I'm sorry, I walked out of the room, or I don't know. I didn't hear you.
No worries at all. It's only if you haven't created your account yet. So have you signed up before? Do you have a ThinkCERCA account?
I have not signed up before, but I just did with my Google. It said log in with Google, and I did that.
Oh, it connected you?
Yeah.
Ignore me. I'm not gonna try to overthink why that worked so well. I was told you needed activation codes, but we're good.
Yeah, I mean, it has my classes on there, so I assume, or maybe somebody set it up for me and I just don't know it. I don't know.
Let's not mess with a good thing. I won't jinx it because it feels like that doesn't usually go my way. So I must be missing a piece of the PowerSchool kind of sync. So great. All right, any other questions before we dive into providing feedback and specifically using ThinkCERCA's rubric? Okay, so I know that I'm toggling between a couple screens here, so I hope that it's not super confusing. But Ryan had mentioned earlier that, I know that there's efforts to have all things social studies be using the same rubric. And there was a very intentional and thoughtful discussion around, well, in ThinkCERCA, everybody's using the ThinkCERCA rubric, and that provides some really interesting data. And so the goal here is, if you are going to be doing a writing lesson in ThinkCERCA and you're able to use the rubric, it's going to provide some really powerful kind of holistic data around for students across subject areas. Now, I know in elementary, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a whole team involved. It might just be you, but it can help us focus on individual needs, kind of track student growth over time and year over year, okay? And so that's kind of the pros and cons debate that was being had. And so I want to talk through some of the logistics of using the rubric score. Some of you might be familiar with this before, but when it comes time to provide student feedback, you're going to see these bells in your ThinkCERCA account, and that indicates that students need feedback on their writing, okay? And so if I click on a bell, I can see here Ben has submitted some writing, and I can see the submission date, and I can provide feedback using the quick score or the rubric score. In this case, I'm clicking rubric score. Okay. Ben did not write very much in this case, but you can see the functionality here down the side. So the rubric score is going to provide different aspects or different categories, and I can click into them to see different levels of mastery or proficiency. And so for this one, reasons here, I can give them a score 1 to 5. Anything that I click here, the functionality feels like I'm highlighting on a paper rubric. Basically, anything I click gets sent to the student as feedback. Otherwise, they don't see any of those check boxes. And so I can give them a score here and go down and grade the different categories. I can also provide individual feedback on the category. So if their claim, I wanted to provide comments, I can do it here. I can also highlight, though, and provide notes in the actual writing, depending on what makes the most sense. Additional feedback, and then a growth focus at the bottom. I can return for revision or submit the grade, and that would freeze it on the student end. Okay. If you just want to provide written feedback, but you don't necessarily want to give them a numerical score, I'm seeing a lot of teachers do this for kind of that first round of feedback. Is I want to make sure that you get some notes from me as your teacher, but I don't want you to see a score. I can go through and do all of the written parts, and I can check the boxes and things like that. And then I can click up here, submit with no score, and that will just take away the scores. You can even put in the scores, then click submit with no score. And when it gets returned to you, your old scores will show up, but then the student wouldn't have seen the numerical value. Okay. So I'm seeing some teachers are finding that helpful for that first round of revision, to just give them feedback, submit with no score, in return for revision. And then when they return it to them, then you add the numerical values if that's your goal. Okay. Ryan, Rebecca, Vincent, anything I missed around rubric, providing feedback, anything that you could clarify, or you would clarify, I should say.
I think that's about right. Again, looking at, I know that there's been talks about maybe changing some of that rubric later on in the future, right? Specializing it and personalizing it to be more specific to a discipline. But where we are now is what you've already described. So unless Vincent or Rebecca have anything else to add, I think that's about right.
Okay, wonderful. Well, perfect. So, okay, I know that this has been talking heavy on Kristen's. I can feel it in my throat, if that makes anybody feel better about the amount of talking Kristen's done. I appreciate everybody's listening. So I've got a couple last resources here, and then I just like to leave some space for Q&A, or if anybody wants to linger and talk things out. The intention of today's training was really to just introduce you to ThinkCERCA if you're new to ThinkCERCA, but definitely to those new social studies writing lessons. And so one resource that I want to make sure everybody leaves with is this ThinkCERCA JCPS Social Studies Kickoff document. And so I'm copying the link and I'm going to drop it in the chat. This is going to link all of our new social studies writing lessons. Just because there are other social studies writing modules, but they don't have the multiple sources. And so the new ones are the ones that are going to always include 2 or more primary sources. And so I just want to make sure that you know which ones are new. I'll keep updating this document as my team keeps hitting publish. There's lots more to come, but I wanted to make sure that it was all centralized in one place. So you can find links to all the new writing lessons there. You can also find resources to guide your first writing lesson or your second or your third, you know, if you've done this with other content areas. At the bottom, I kind of highlighted some of my favorites, including some that could work for a remote or a hybrid situation. Okay, so I dropped that link in the chat. Highly recommend you save that as it will have the links to the new lessons. I want to call out in these last few days of fully remote learning, we do have resources for remote and hybrid learning. That's going to be at our Remote Learning Resource Center. Lots of JCPS teachers have given us feedback on this, and it's just, we constantly iterate on this, and hopefully we're coming to a close of needing to, but at least over the course of the last year, this has been updated, including some, and when I clicked on that, it opened it, but including some plans, including a hybrid plan for you, a 5-day remote learning plan. Now, you know, if you're hybrid and you just want an example of how this could look over the course of 5 class days, whether that's 5 in a row or whether that's 5 separated over a couple weeks, take a look at these lesson plans. Again, I love looking at other people's plans and making them better. And you know your students and kind of what works best with them. And so, but maybe this will give you a place to start. So I'm on slide 46 for that. Those 5-day remote learning plans are going to be something I definitely recommend. Also, we have student engagement activities. As I called out, thinking about this in terms of the 6 steps is usually an easy way to go about it. And so we've taken the 6 steps of the writing lesson and linked different engagement strategies for each step, really just honing in on active learning and collaborating with peers for each of the steps. Oh, and I keep clicking right on something that has a link. Okay. Once we're back in person, we won't have any of those linked or any of those resources linked, and we're just going to be talking about our teacher toolkit. Lots of great stuff here, especially for teaching Circa to your students, just as a framework and ways to practice that. Lots of fun icebreakers and games that you can play with your students to have them practicing Circa before they actually need to apply it in a writing lesson or, you know, on an assessment, things like that. A step-by-step plan for your first writing lesson, some graphic organizers you can leverage, really just trying to emphasize using Circa in kind of multiple disciplines, but really as a framework, something that students can take and keep in their kind of toolbox as they navigate school, but also beyond that, beyond the doors of our classroom. Okay. All right, I'm going to leave time for questions, but if folks do need to hop off, know that I don't want you to leave without knowing you've got more support to come. So my email's here, Kristen@thinkcerca.com. It's just Kristen with an I. There's the live chat that I called out in that bottom right corner, Help Center, and then teacher training courses. If you wanted kind of an on-demand option to what we went through today, there's more in our teacher training courses that you could take. So I am going to stop talking again and hold some space for any questions, any concerns that are coming up. But overall, just want to say thank you all for listening.